Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for Monday, November 25th. We welcome all those that are in attendance this evening and those that are also watching at TV at home or streaming. This evening, we have a somewhat short agenda. We have the honor this evening of local Scout Troop 74. They call their home Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church. They will present the colors and lead us in the pledge this evening. Our invocation will be led by IT Director Tony Fisher. Please rise.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, in this time of Thanksgiving, we have much to thank you for. Our family, our friends, our city, and our country. Most of all, we give thanks for you are good, and your love endures forever. As we meet tonight, be with this board in their deliberations and help them be wise in their decisions. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech, and help our leaders make decisions that would be pleasing to you. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Thanks again to Boy Scout Troop 74 from OLPH Church. I know a lot of family members are here this evening. Also, I want to recognize Ryan Vert, who's the Scoutmaster. Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate you being here this evening and leading your troop as well. That brings us to item number 4 on the agenda, setting the agenda and adopting the agenda. The agenda was presented to the public and has been available online and sent out to the community. There were no modifications of the agenda during executive session. The board meets in executive session at 5:30. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to add a discussion. I've been deposed in this Cordova Triangle lawsuit against the city, and I have made a request for funding for an attorney to answer some questions relevant to that lawsuit. We have not yet voted on that, and the plaintiff's attorney has filed a motion to compel me to appear at the deposition, and I need an answer from the board on whether or not I will get funding for that personal attorney.
There is no item on the agenda, and as our practice, submittals to be added to the agenda are done during the week.
Mayor, with all due respect, I made this request weeks ago. I made it again last week. I've made this several times. You are deliberately keeping it off the agenda, and
we have a city attorney, and the city attorney represents the entire board of mayor and aldermen. If you seek your own counsel, that is your prerogative. So there has been a motion and has been seconded.
In this case, the city attorney does not represent the entire board. He is acting under your direction. We have separate legal counsel that is acting on behalf of the city and the insurance.
That is incorrect. We have a primary city attorney that represents us and can also delegate that responsibility to other attorneys to represent us in legal matters and in court cases.
Point of inquiry.
You no longer have the floor,
Point
sir.
of inquiry. Who is the lead city?
Sir, you should know that. You've served on this board. It's Mac. You no longer have the floor, sir. Okay, we have an agenda. It has been said. We have Alderman Massey, you are confusing the board, you're confusing the people that are here this evening and the residents. We have a city attorney, we've had a city attorney, we appoint that person each year annually, and so you no longer have the floor. Alderman Yonda made the motion to adopt, and it was seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes. Thank you, Board. The agenda has been adopted for this evening. That takes us to item 5 on the agenda, approval of minutes from the meeting regularly scheduled for November 11th, 2019. There were no modifications or additions, any type of activity or discussion on the minutes during executive session. Are there any at this time? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented to the public?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda this evening, citizens to be heard. Clerk, were there any submittals for this evening? Does anyone like to fill out a sheet for citizens to be heard at this time? See no one come forward. There will be no citizens to be heard this evening. That takes us to item 7 on the agenda, special recognition, Beautification Commission Business Award. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll ask Ms. Karen Garner, Reggie Garner, Gina Bostic, Mary Brown, and Whitney Harvey, as well as our commission member, Mary Beth Ulicky, to step forward as I read this award. Magnolia Homes, located at 3023 Center Oak Way, Suite 101, has been in business since 1987. Owner Karen Garner created and has sustained the successful Germantown business by using her passion for building high-quality homes. Ms. Garner and her son, Reggie Garner, Jr., work with ST Dreamscape LLC for their landscaping and property maintenance needs. The business site includes well-manicured evergreen screens of arbor vitae, holly, little gem magnolias. A row of pin oak trees also provide a green buffer from the street, and the front entrance of Magnolia Homes business is beautifully appointed with a feature landscape bed of Indian hawthorn, a blood good Japanese maple tree, border plants, and borders which add natural beauty. These all complete the welcome experience for additional substantial planters are filled with seasonal color for year-round interest. The level of landscape detail, maintenance, and care of this Germantown property demonstrate pride in their appearance and their commitment to helping Germantown look beautiful. The Beautification Commission expresses much appreciation to this Germantown business for their efforts, and we are pleased to present the November Beautification Commission Business Award to Magnolia Homes.
Garner family and team, we are very appreciative that you take great care of your business location, and on a side note, your homes throughout this region are beautiful as well. Thank you very, very much, and thank you for making Germantown your business home.
Mayor, if I might interject
Sure,
one
go
thing,
ahead.
I'd also like to say a happy birthday to Beth Ulicky. I think it's her birthday today, so we'd like to wish you a happy birthday as well.
Wow, this is a good place to spend your birthday, correct? Thank you, and again, you guys can take your leave. You probably need to go sell some homes. All right, thank you. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda this evening, Alderman Liaison Reports. We go from position 1 through 5. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification Commission met earlier this month, and I want to thank the members of the Beautification Commission who assisted in the decoration of our City Hall lobby last Friday. I want to remind everyone of the Christmas tree lighting to be held Friday out in Municipal Park at 5 p.m. The festivities will begin with lighting of the tree at 5:30, and then we'll come inside for pictures with Santa, cookies, Christmas carols, and other refreshments. I also want to remind the public of our holiday lighting contest for our residences and businesses alike. Please send an evening photo of your display. The categories are listed on the city's website, as well as details for submitting your entry, and they are due by Monday, December the 9th. That will complete my report.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Education Commission members delivered cookies and words of encouragement to each school in the city, public and private, as they celebrate American Education Week. The library board heard from the Friends of the Library, who reported that they now have 901 members, and that's not just the area code, 901 members, and the library board itself has set a goal of 1,000 members. So we encourage you all to become a friend of the Germantown Library. It's only $10 a year. You get a free book of your choice from the Friends store each month and an extra book in your birthday month. And it makes a great holiday gift. Perfect stocking stuffer. Parks and Recreation Commission is gearing up to support the 2019 holiday parade that will take place Saturday, December 14th at 2 p.m. along Farmington Boulevard. Businesses, organizations, and individuals still have time to submit entries, with the deadline being December 2nd. Just call Parks and Recreation Department for more information. And if I could, sir, just say a few words regarding the city being awarded the 2019 Malcolm Baldridge Performance of Excellence Award. I was at Federal Express, actually long before we were FedEx, working on the customer service front lines in 1990 when we received the Malcolm Baldridge Award. I remember how proud our CEO, Mr. Fred Smith, was that our commitment to the mission of people, service, and profit was being recognized as the industry leader in overnight delivery. The city of Germantown, our residents, our exceptional staff, and all who jumped on the wagon of doing a job, not just a good job, but doing the absolute best job possible for the people of Germantown. They've done that in a very deliberate way for close to 10 years now. I believe it's important to know what the Malcolm Baldridge Award is and what it isn't. What it isn't just about an award. It's not about a beautiful crystal trophy to put on display, even though we'll proudly do just that. In the business world, we call what the Baldridge Award means a tangible return on investment. And I can speak from my experiences with the city, the value that a culture of refining processes to ensure that Germantown remains the premier place to live, to work, to go to school, to worship, or to visit is immeasurable, even though we've been measuring those outcomes for a decade now. The work that has gone into attaining this award is why we're one of the safest cities in the area, if not the safest, with response times for fire, ambulance, and police that are the envy of all our peer cities. It's why we have beautiful parks, our library, a world-class performing arts center, and exceptional schools where students are the focus. Those things don't happen by accident without the intentional and deliberate measures that these men and women put in place and execute every day. And I can say unequivocally that the team of professionals who call Germantown their workplace are dedicated to making sure we continue to thrive. They're dedicated to doing their absolute very best day in and day out for Germantown. Congratulations on this important achievement, and thank you for striving for excellence.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for those kind words. Alderman Massey.
Thank you, Mayor. I hadn't intended to speak on the Baldridge Award, but I would like to say that I do appreciate the time that all the staff spent working on it. Now, I tend to disagree with Alderman Gibson to some point, because I think, there are a lot of positive attributes to the Baldridge Award. But when you're comparing what is done in the private sector to what is done in the public sector, I think we have to be cautious in using taxpayers' money in pursuit of awards like this. And in the case of the Baldridge Award, I think that a lot of taxpayer dollars were wasted in the pursuit of this award, and a lot of the work that was done was actually done in a way that created detrimental zoning changes and an attempt to rather densify the city of Germantown and over-urbanize the city. And so there's two different ways of looking at the award, and I don't want to take anything away from the hard work that the employees did, but I also think that the taxpayers should be given a lot of credit for all of their money that was used in paying really qualified staff and having staff spend a lot of time in pursuit of the award. And I think the people that haven't really favored the zoning changes that resulted from the pursuit of the Baldridge Award should also be recognized, because a lot of families feel like that the smart growth, the smart code that was implemented in pursuit of the economic sustainability plan and the Baldridge Award was detrimental to our neighborhood. So I think it's fair for me to say that. Otherwise, I don't have a report, Mayor. Thank you.
Alderman Owens.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So the DRC meets tomorrow night, and we are going to be reviewing some signage for Untuck It, a new shirt store in Saddle Creek, the Baptist Specialty Hospital site plan that is going in on Exeter Road there, a sign for overall Saddle Creek, as well as a Stringer Nursery building expansion. And I feel like, gosh, I would be remiss if I didn't have some comments. And so I'll just say, you know, I was working here, Patrick, when not when we started, but it was sort of a vision that had come into place, the Baldridge Award, and we knew we had a foundation that we might be able to achieve that, and we just had to work through processes to get it. And so, you know, I think in talking to the staff that I have throughout this City of Germantown staff and a wide range of staff, everyone has been fully on board with contributing and being a part of getting this award and achieving this award and making the city better process-wise for our citizens. And that's what this does. That's what this award does. It makes our city better, and it's someone compared it to seeking higher education as a person, getting a master's degree or a PhD, if you will, and that's what we're doing as a city. We're creating better processes for our citizens, making it a better place to live for our residents. And I think the processes that we've put in place, that's the work, the true work, and the benefit to the citizens. The award is icing on the cake, but I do know this, that award will contribute to economic development for years to come throughout as far as this city goes. And so I think it was well worth the endeavor, both from a process improvement standpoint and in a recognition standpoint. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
My one commission was canceled, but I do have some comments for Baldridge. It's obvious that that's evidence of excellence every day here at our city. I cannot thank our staff enough for the dedication and drive that has resulted in our earning the Malcolm Baldridge Award. It's just incredible to me. When I was first elected, I did not immediately see the advantages of this effort. However, it was quite evident to me quickly that it was a recipe for success. It is a process that drives performance to a higher level. We have one of the greatest cities in the nation to live in, and this is certainly a validation of that greatness. Words cannot express my sincere appreciation to our staff and our employees for all the work that you've done all the years that I've been here, and that what you've done to make this city #1 in just about every category. I really appreciate it, and the citizens of this great city appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. That concludes Alderman liaison reports. Just a couple of comments from the mayor's office. I wanted to publicly recognize and thank City Historian Andy Pouncey for his leadership in the Celebrate 200-Year Bicentennial event at the Shelby Farms yesterday. I do want to recognize and thank the Vice Mayor, Alderman Sanders, and Alderman Owens for attending the banquet as well, the luncheon yesterday. Historian Pouncey was able to bring together the Germantown Festival, Germantown Community Library, GPAC, West Tennessee Genealogical Center, and others to man our tent, our city tent, and we shined among the other 7 cities in Shelby County. And from a personal standpoint, just to tie up a little bit on Baldridge, we will continue to celebrate this for weeks and months to come. But from a personal standpoint, I cannot say that I've never been more proud to be part of an organization like all you guys. Thank you. That takes us to item 9 on the agenda, our preliminary agenda. And during executive session, our board went through each item on the preliminary agenda. Those items include donation for chairs for Police Communications Center, donation Germantown Community Library, and purchase 4 medium-duty trucks. All those items, again, were thoroughly presented and vetted. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Yonda, seconded by Alderman Sanders. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Preliminary agenda passes. We move, thank you, Board, for your support on that. That moves us to the regular agenda. Item 10 on the agenda, Group Life and Long-Term Disability. I think Human Resources Director Steve Walensky will make that presentation. Director Walensky.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Board, the purpose of this agenda item is to consider approval of a one-year extension of the existing group life insurance and long-term disability policy beginning January 1, 2020 and ending on December 31, 2020. Life insurance currently covers all full-time employees and elected officials while serving in office and amounts to 3 times annual earnings up to a maximum of $300,000. Accidental death and dismemberment insurance provides the same coverage to the same group of employees. A basic life insurance policy, benefit of $15,000, covers eligible employees who retired after August 2000. These policies do not include temporary and seasonal employees with the city. Long-term disability insurance provides financial protection for full-time employees by paying 66 2/3 of monthly earnings up to a maximum of $6,000 per month. Employees are eligible for long-term disability, we call it LTD, benefits starting the 91st day of their illness or disability or after 12 weeks of family medical leave, which is also commonly known as FMLA. To be eligible for that, an employee must remain unable to perform every duty of their occupation with the city and must be under the regular care of a licensed physician. The entire policy is available in the Human Resources section of the city website to anyone on a 24/7, 365 days a year basis. This agenda item supports Germantown Forward 2030, City Services and Finance Strategic Objective Number 4. The city provides high-quality services and takes pride in its technically competent workforce. The recommendation of staff is to accept the contract extensions offered by U.S. Able Life Insurance Company for group life insurance and the accidental death and dismemberment insurance, and by Lincoln Financial Group for long-term disability, both of these through Fowler Insurance and Employee Benefits, Inc. Now, U.S. Able Life Insurance has not had a rate increase since the inception of this contract in 2013. This extension has an increase of 7.26%, or $837.86 a month. Lincoln Financial Group has also served the city since 2013, with one rate increase in 2016. The Lincoln Financial Group increase for 2020 is 5.26%. Both increases are tied to the same key factors. The average age of our city employee is increased from 48 to 49.5 years of age. 37% are 50 or over. And the total number of covered lives has increased, with the majority of those in the public safety arena. I think with police, probably the 7th and now coming on 8th district. And in the case of fire, it's hard to even think about this, but back in 2013, I don't know that we didn't have our ambulance service then. So this brings into play the ambulance service. So they make up more than the majority, actually, of that increase. And finally, the customer service experience with these vendors, working with our HR benefits manager, has been excellent. We're really grateful for that. This is the final year of these contracts, and the city is scheduled for a new RFP process next year. We also have with us tonight Mr. Al Fowler from Fowler Insurance to assist me as needed in answering any questions from the mayor and board.
Thank you, Director Walensky. Is there a motion to authorize a 12-month contract extension in the amount of $148,584 for group life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment insurance with USA Life Insurance Company, $98,077.80 for long-term disability with Lincoln Financial Group, and a contract extension with Fowler Insurance for a combined total amount, annual premium of $246,661.80. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Alderman Yonda, seconded by Alderman Sanders. And just remind the board and staff, please direct all questions and answers through the chair. Floor is open. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, what part of the premiums does the city pay for these coverages?
Director.
The city is paying 100%.
Thank you. Further questions?
What part of the premium does the city pay for elective members of the household, so like a spouse?
Director.
It doesn't apply to the spouse.
Okay.
Thank you. There are no
So
coverage. Go ahead.
no eligible children for the life insurance, for example, or spouses?
No, sir.
Okay. And what about for retirees?
Director.
This policy is for existing employees.
What policies are available for retirees?
Mayor,
Director. That's not part of this
That's
agenda
not part
item.
of this agenda item, no.
Just limit your questions to what's on the agenda item, please.
You're talking
Continue.
about the 15, I'm sorry. So if an employee passed away, there's $15,000, and as I remember, it was explained to me, this was intended to be used to assist with burial expenses.
Thank you, Director. Further questions?
Was that for retired employees? Is that what you're saying?
No. Did I
Go ahead.
misspeak?
I'm sorry, Director, did you answer the question or not? I got distracted.
I'm just double checking,
Sure.
Mayor. It's 15,000 for retirees as well.
Thank you. Further questions?
There is a sentence that says a basic life insurance policy benefit of $15,000 covers eligible employees who retired after August 2000. So the reason that my question, I believe, was relevant is that the background information specifies a date and time, which is August 2000. So I'm trying to figure out why you differentiated between people who retired after 2000 and then I guess those before. So what are the different coverages that are available?
Director, under this particular agenda item?
Mayor, I'm not aware of other coverages. This is the coverage, and I took this from the records I'm familiar with. So I'm not aware of, I'm aware that this policy took effect per the records after 2000.
Thank you. Further questions?
Mayor, are we still paying any premiums on whole life policies?
That's not part of this agenda item, is it?
No, sir.
No.
Well, it's relevant in terms of who's receiving benefits and whether or not the basic life insurance covers all the employees and if employees are getting different coverages. So I think it is relevant. I think the board should know that.
It's not part of this agenda nor this motion. If you'd like that information, I would encourage you before, when your packets go out, to get with staff opposed to at the meeting.
Well, that information wouldn't be on the public record, and I'd prefer to have all the information on the public record, and I think the citizens would like to see
You
it.
could make the staff aware of your questioning so they could prepare for you. So continue. You have the floor. And again, we have this item that's in front of you.
No further questions.
Thank you. Floor is open. Alderman Sanders?
So would you just clarify for me that out of the employees' check, however often they get paid, there's no withholding to
No, sir.
provide these coverages?
Director?
Mayor, no, to the Alderman, there is no withholding.
Thank
This is a 100% city benefit.
You still have the floor. Go ahead.
Are they also covered by state benefits
Director?
Not
for
that I'm aware of.
line of duty death or accidental death, dismemberment, or
And Chief Selberg, there may be something available at the state level for public safety?
Go ahead, Chief.
Death benefits are available through the state and federal.
For police and fire? Yep. Outside of this particular coverage we provide. Go
in
ahead.
addition. And we're covering workers' comp in a different item, so I'll save that question for later then. So this is fully funded then by
By the city.
the city general fund.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Further questions on this particular item? Alderman? It's been properly moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
The measure passes. We appreciate the support staff does and also our employees on that particular item. That brings us to item 11 on the agenda, contract third-party administrator and stop-loss services. Director Walensky.
Mayor and Board, this will take a little bit longer, but it's an important item for sure. The purpose of this agenda item is to request your consideration and approval of a 36-month contract with 2 additional one-year options with Health Cost Solutions, HCS, to be the third-party administrator, referred to as TPA, effective January 1, 2020. This contract also includes stop-loss coverage for 1 year through American Fidelity. Now, from a highly competitive employment recruitment and retention perspective, which is getting more challenging every day and every year, this is one of the most important and valued benefits we offer. The city has approximately 1,100 participating covered lives in the current health plan. This includes eligible full-time employees, dependents, and retirees. Now, public safety and public works represent 60% of our total workforce, with the first responders and police and fire averaging 24 to 26 years in tenure, and public works averaging 18. The city actively promotes preventive health and wellness as part of our award-winning Healthy Germantown initiative. Just this weekend, we finished the third year of Walk Across Tennessee, simulating our citizens and employees as teams walking across the state to a really nice outcome. This program includes free annual physicals, flu shots, screenings, Germantown Athletic Club memberships, nutrition and mindfulness workshops, everything we can think of that contributes to a healthier workforce now and hopefully through their lives, and as important as anything, as well as the lives of their loved ones and when they're not here anymore, working. 6 qualified vendors responded to the request for proposal for TPA and stop-loss insurance services. The evaluation team included a diverse group of representatives from police, fire, finance, and human resources, with the assistance of procurement and the city's consultant, Employee Security Planning LLC, ESP, represented by Mr. Bob Shoup and Ms. Brittany Spradling, who are here with me tonight. After a thorough analysis of each proposal by the evaluation team and ESP, the recommendation is to accept the TPA proposal from HCS with stop-loss coverage through American Fidelity. With this service, the city will continue to consolidate its claims processing, pharmacy benefits provider, network access, and stop-loss services under one vendor with an additional cost savings. There will be no change in network and no disruption for employees, since the network will remain with Cigna OAP. The future of the healthcare system in our nation has been debated for years now. It continues with no resolution in sight. This new contract, if approved tonight, will give great comfort to our employees, retirees, and dependents, knowing that we've locked in an excellent network with a TPA that we know and work well with for at least another 3 years. This agenda item supports the Germantown Forward 2030 City Services and Finance Strategic Objective, which states the city will provide community services that are responsive to customer needs. The importance of a quality, affordable health plan is vital to the recruitment and retention of the very talented team of men and women who comprise our workforce and are committed to our core values, to lead responsibly, to deliver service excellence, and to produce A-plus results. Mr. Shoup and Ms. Spradling, along with Ms. Piefer, representing procurement, will be glad to assist me in answering questions from the mayor and board.
Thank you, Director Walensky, for your presentation. Is there a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into a 36-month contract effective January 1, 2020, with 2 additional one-year options with Health Cost Solutions Incorporated to be the city's third-party administrator for health plan services and to approve American Fidelity for stop-loss coverage? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion. See no one come forward. It's been
Mayor.
properly.
I was trying to
Why
say
don't you
yes.
speak up? I can't read your face every time. Alderman Massey.
Okay. Mr. Walensky, can you tell us who's eligible for the medical coverages?
Director,
It's in all the documents, but all of the eligible employees, full-time employees, retirees, dependents, that's what makes up the roughly 1,100. I think currently 385 of them are full-time employees. There's a balance that are retirees, and then we have all of the dependents for both.
thank you, Director. Further questions?
How many are retirees?
I think the number I last saw was around 117.
Thank you, Director. Questions?
What part of the premium does the city pay for the full-time employees?
Director?
We have a 90-10 plan. So we have an annual deductible that is currently $500. The annual out-of-pocket is $3,500. Once an employee reaches that $3,500 limit, then the city picks up 100% thereafter. The city is paying, of the total of our self-funded plan, roughly 87%.
Thank you, Director. Further questions?
So of the amount that's taken out of an employee's check each month, how much is taken out of an employee's check each month just for the employee?
Director?
Mayor, we have a handout that explains it depends which coverage the person takes. If it's employee plus one, employee with family, it varies. I don't have that table in front of me, but I can easily get that.
Sure, thank you.
How much does the city pay for an employee? How much of the premium does a city employee pay, or how much does the city pay for the employees?
Director, I believe your answer to that is 90. Go ahead.
Well, we're paying out of a healthcare fund, so there's not an amount that you would say is our monthly premium.
Right. So,
That wouldn't happen in a self-funded plan.
Okay, thank you.
well, just
Alderman?
for full disclosure, I'm on the plan, and there is an amount that is deducted from my paycheck each month. And so the point I'm trying to get to is, what are we deducting for employees, which I believe is nothing, and then what are we deducting for the spouses, and then what are we deducting for children? For each, there should be a number for each child. There should be a number for each spouse, and that's what I'm looking for. And it should be pretty straightforward, so somebody should be able to answer the question.
Director?
So, Mayor, we have a spreadsheet with that information on it. If this item is approved during the month of December, we will be, our HR benefits manager, myself, will be touring or having sessions in here for every employee, and we'll review what changes might happen from this year to next. But that information has been readily available and provided in a summary of benefits to every employee. It would go including to the alderman. So there is a deduction. There's a deduction with every paycheck.
Is there a
On the
deduction?
coverage that you choose to take, but my intent wouldn't be to get
Yep,
into that with you here.
Thank you. Continue.
If it's readily available and the employees have it and I have it, that's wonderful. But what I'm wanting you to do is tell the people at home who are watching exactly what we, as employees of the city, pay for our health insurance. And like you said, it's readily available. You should know it off the top of your head, right? And so all I'm asking you to do is explain it to the people at home.
Alderman, Mayor,
Director, go ahead.
I'm happy to provide that information to the board. I don't have it in front of me tonight.
Sure, and I would just remind the board that, getting with staff, once your packet is delivered, that allows them to prepare, because they'll answer any question you want with enough preparation time. Most of the aldermen do a good job of following through with staff. So you still have the floor and a few seconds remaining.
Well, Mayor, you constantly bring up the point that we should do these things in closed-door meetings with staff. But again, the point of my questions is to have these
If you were able
questions
to,
answered
if you were
in
able
public.
if you were able to do it and give them advanced knowledge, they can answer everything.
Mayor,
you
this is basic knowledge. He just said it was basic knowledge. He should
Time
be
is
able
now
to.
concluded. You no longer have the floor, sir. Discussion? Yes, Vice Mayor?
Mayor, to the director, just wanted to ask a question as far as there are multiple plans. And so for those different plans, it would mean different deductions depending on which plan you choose.
So,
Director, go ahead.
So actually, Mayor, to the Alderman, there's one plan. We're in the Cigna network.
Okay.
So the variable is whether or not you take it as an individual employee, whether you are employee plus one or employee with family.
Point of clarification.
Well, excuse me, sir. It's either point of inquiry or point of order.
Well,
Which one would you like?
well, we'll do point of order then.
Point of order.
We have an alderman who just said that there are multiple plans.
What is the rule that you wish to have a point of order decided on?
Well, we have an alderman that misrepresented the record, and I think.
Well,
first of all, I asked for a point of clarification, which was the proper point of order, and I think the parliamentarians may be saying that to you now.
That is not correct. So what is your point of order?
Well, are we just going to allow aldermen to make statements that misrepresent the record?
Please do not. When you are free to have your time on the floor, and you may speak at your leisure. Currently, the Vice Mayor has the floor. Her line of questioning is appropriate. Continue.
Mayor, I'd be happy to ask my question again rather than making a supposition. We don't have multiple plans. We have the one. And so for the one plan, there are different levels based on whether you're taking it as an individual, married, with children, that type of.
Director?
Well, yes, and I'd like to add from the start, in addition to having the meetings, you realize we may not get to every person, so we mail out all of the changes and in this case, just what those rates are. So I would be very surprised if the alderman doesn't already have that information. And you should have had it, he should have had it this entire year. Do I know what each category is off the top of my head?
Director, just go ahead and conclude answering the Vice Mayor's question, please. Or do you have anything more to add?
I don't.
Okay,
it's one plan, and it's so simple. And I haven't even had a chance to say this, but the satisfaction ratings that we get from our work with HCS and the gratitude that we get from the employees for the quality of the plan. When you look back in time and the questions that were raised when the Affordable Care Act came into being, if you like your plan, can you keep it? If you like your doctor, can you keep it? Will your rates be affordable? Our employees rave about our plan, and they're grateful for it, and we're grateful for them.
Thank you for
Thank you, Director.
Thank you for helping me clear up my misstatement. Thank you.
Floor is open. Alderman Sanders?
How does this plan that we offer our employees compare to our sister cities surrounding, if you know, I assume
Director?
you may talk to the other HR directors?
I think it compares favorably in this respect. We're not losing employees to our other sister cities, but we have had several of those employees come here, and one of the attractions is the health plan. There are a couple other communities that have wellness clinics. Bartlett does, Collierville does, the other suburban cities do. We opted not for that. Cigna's in-network hospital provider is Methodist. Methodist, the last count I had 32 primary care locations surrounding the area. Our employee demographic is pretty unique. We have employees, believe it or not, who come here from 4 states, from 12 counties, 10 or 12 counties. So being so vast, if you include dependents in that mix as well, having one wellness clinic really wouldn't fit well with the access. So when we looked at our plan and what would work best for us, given the relationship we have with HCS, with Cigna, and with Methodist, the idea that we could have this vast primary care network, in addition to providing annual physicals through Life Signs, which is going up as well. I mean, we're really emphasizing the preventative aspect of that, has been received and reviewed very well.
Thank you, Director. Further questions?
So is it fair to say that the benefit we offer our employees is as good or better than any of the surrounding cities,
Director?
as far as the premium they have to pay for this benefit?
In my opinion, and not just here, I serve on our Tennessee Personnel Managers Association Board of Directors, and at a meeting I was at in Brentwood last week, we were able to hear what other communities around the state are doing, and ours is very, very comparable. It's one of the real selling points that brings people here.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Sure, Mayor.
Alderman Massey?
Sure. To Alderman Sanders' point, I can tell you as an insurance professional myself, someone who sells these products and deals with these, it's very rich. I mean, it's a great product. I utilize it. The question is whether or not it's the cost benefit is there from a standpoint, I think, for the taxpayers, and that's the question that I think the Personnel Advisory Commission has to answer each year. Speaking of that, Mr. Walensky, can you tell us what the projected cost will be for this next year, including the projected claims?
Director?
Including the projected claims, I just looked at that today. If the last 2 months tie to what the first 10 months have been, our total claims paid will be in the neighborhood of $5.3 million.
Thank you. Further questions?
So when we're looking at the total cost to the taxpayers, we have to take that into consideration, I think, because what we're really paying as a city is somewhere around $5.3 million, and then we have the additional cost of the fees.
No, sir, that's included
Director.
within.
Okay, so you deduct these approximately $627,000 in fees, and we're left with somewhere around $4.7 million in cost.
Director?
I think so.
Is that Ms. Polston? Is she the one speaking
Brittany
behind you?
Spradley.
It's Ms. Spradlin. Ms. Spradlin, can you come up to the podium? Can you answer that question for me, please?
I have the numbers on what they're projecting for 2020, not
Okay.
for your current 2019 year. So what they, looking at the proposed American Fidelity contract, we look at the total amount, let's see, that's HCS. So, I don't know if that's got, sorry, there's a lot of numbers on here. We have the total annual maximum funding, which would be, I don't have the expected, so it'd be about 25% less than this number. So this number is 6.7 million, that's just claims, but you've got to back out about 25% because that's maximum funding. So that's very different from what they actually expect your claims to hit. You all in the past, since 2012, have never reached the fully funded number. So we would need to add that administrative number to that fully funded number.
So we would add the approximately 600,000 to the 6.7 million?
Right, but you've got to remember to take out the 25% overage there. That's a fully funded number, which you should not hit.
Sure. And so do you know what the cost is to each employee for the employee himself and then their dependents?
The employee contribution levels are set, I believe, by the PAC. So that is not something that we are consulting on. So no, I don't know what those are off the top of my head. I believe I have the one sheet that he was referencing before, that Mr. Walensky was referencing before, in my files back at our office. I don't have it here.
Will you agree tonight to send that information to me in an email this week?
Yeah.
Good, Director?
Is the Alderman referring to the page of employee portion of the premium or of the monthly payment? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I want to know what is deducted from each employee's, and you can do it by classification if you want to, from each employee's paycheck for the employee themselves and then their dependents.
Right, and that number varies based on which oh, here we go. So employee only, do you want it weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly?
Monthly.
Monthly? Okay, employee only is $80.93. Employee plus spouse is $212.50. Employee plus children is $170.61. And family is $302.17. Would you also like the dental?
No, the medical will be fine.
Alderman, that concludes your time on the floor. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion carries. We appreciate the support of the board and the employees, and everyone on the program appreciates that as well. That brings us to item 12 on the agenda, renewal, property and casualty insurance. Procurement Director Piefer.
Good afternoon, good evenings. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2019-20 property and casualty insurance renewal from the Public Entity Partners. Assisting me tonight will be Mr. David McDonald of Insight Risk Management. The Public Entity Partners utilizes Mr. McDonald to place these policies. As indicated before, and speaking with us, Mr. McDonald assists us greatly in our processes and our day-to-day operations, and he's a wealth of knowledge for us. Obtaining this insurance coverage supports the Germantown Forward 2030 City Services and Finance Strategic Objective number 4. City provides high-quality services. It does this by limiting or reducing the risk of loss by obtaining adequate insurance coverage and providing reasonable insurance that the city's financial resources are protected in a reasonable and responsible and prudent manner. Now, that's a lot. That's a lot said. This being said, this is one of the largest annual expenditures for the city of Germantown. However, the city sees this as a commitment to our employees to ensure that they are protected while they're doing their jobs. Our employees are committed as well. They do this by being responsible in their jobs, completing many hours of individual, group, and online training, participating in our Central Safety Committee, using our systematic and tested, proven policies, continuous improvement processes, and many more that would be too numerous to list. This hard work shows in the premiums that I will present to you tonight. Just some general notes. I'm not going to rehash the entire process and the entire packet that I gave you. I'll hit some high notes and then be available to answer any questions. The overall premium for the policies totals $1,045,772. This is under our FY20 budget by $71,366. This is policy year 12/1/19 through 12/1/20. This represents only a 2.1% increase over last year's premium. As Administrator Lawton alluded to earlier, the partners provide us with dividends. The dividends for this amount this year is $103,445. This is 30% increase over last year's renewal, which is great based on the dividends that were provided. This represents a 9.9% savings off the annual premium cost, which is tremendous. It's one of the reasons that we utilize the public entity partners as a captive arrangement. We are able to get those dividends back to the city. Premium overviews. Continuing, we do have broker commissions for this, as I stated earlier. Mr. McDonald is our broker of record for this, and he will be, Insight Risk Management will receive agent commissions of $61,343 this year. For premium overviews, for property, the city's property is appraised every 3 years, and this was an appraisal year. As done, the insured value of the covered property is valued at $182.4 million. This is up 2.2%, mainly due to that adjustment, an adjustment in property acquisitions and renovations, i.e. the athletic club renovations and so forth. The liability premium was 3.5% higher than the expiring policy, due in large part to the increases in vehicle values of 8.9% and public safety employees. When you buy a fire truck and a sewer vac, they're pretty expensive things that add on to that cost. Additional cyber liability was added this year as a new item from Public Entity Partners. This covers us up to $250 per occurrence for ransomware, social engineering, and data restoration expenses. This provides another layer of protection for the city. Workers' compensation, this current premium is based on $29.5 million in total covered payrolls. This includes full-time and part-time people. The increase in workers' comp premium is attributable to the following. The premium increase of 5% is due to an overall increase in total payroll by 6.3%. This includes the city's annual 3% merit adjustments, the step increases for public safety personnel, and a full year of the fire and police personnel from creation of the new police district, and also the fire grants that were utilized. The payroll for public safety, however, it was up 8.5%, but the base rates that we have, which is our experience rates, maintained. So they were very similar to the expiring policies, and they remained unchanged, which is a good thing for us. Therefore, we respectfully recommend the approval of the 2019-2020 policy renewal with public entity partners. This concludes my presentation. Mr. McDonald's available for any questions.
Thank you, Director Piefer, for your presentation. Is there a motion to approve the renewal of insurance coverage and payment of premiums, less the related dividends, per the attached renewal information from public entity partners for property, workers' compensation, and general liability policies? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion by Alderman Sanders, seconded by Alderman Yonda. The floor is open for discussion. Alderman Sanders.
I had asked Mayor Ms. Piefer a question earlier in the week. I had some questions from a member of the public, and just wanted to let others know that may have seen the agenda item on online and may be watching on TV tonight. But on the page listed named insured under the City of Germantown, there is at the bottom the last 6: Germantown GPAC Foundation, Germantown Education Foundation, Leadership Germantown Incorporated, Bobby Lanier Farm Park Incorporated, Friends of the Germantown Library, and Friends of the Germantown Animal Shelter, which are all 501c3s. And I've got the answer, but I just want to ask and make sure, let the public know that we're not actually insuring these 501c3 organizations for liability of anything that they do. It's just simply the city.
Director?
Mayor, Mr. McDonald is going to answer that question. He assisted me with the answer earlier.
Thank you.
Sir, please come forward.
First off, I want to apologize to y'all. The information that I gave Director Piefer was incomplete, as the GPAC, Germantown Educational Foundation, Leadership Germantown, Bobby Lanier Farm, Friends of Germantown Library, and Friends of Germantown Animal. It should have been City of Germantown as respects. which does not make them an additional insured. As respects means only the acts, errors, or omissions of the first party, the city of Germantown, resulting from the first party's involvement in the activities of the second party, which would be those entities right there. Liability arising from activities of the second party or other third parties are not covered. The insurance is excess over any primary insurance provided to the second party that may insure to the benefit of the first party. So that error was on me. I should have had as respects, which changed up the whole terminology versus an additional insured.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. So I appreciate that clarification.
Sure.
Sorry for interrupting. So being just as respects named, there's no real additional cost to the taxpayer to have that listed in
No
there.
additional cost at all
But it
to the
is
taxpayer.
prudent to have it in there.
Yes, and really, it's not as much of a claims function as it's an identity. So if we had the Germantown Motocross Club 501c3, it would be excluded. But this just lets the underwriters know what the city of Germantown's involved in. So like the rugby club is excluded from y'all's policy because they've got their own insurance.
Right. And these 501c3s likely do too.
They do too.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, Mr. McDonald. Further questions? Alderman Massey?
I guess you just mentioned something about the rugby club, so I guess my next question would be if we need to specifically name these different organizations in order to possibly be covered from a liability standpoint. I mean, do we need to look at naming the rugby club at this point if we're in some way affiliated with them? I mean, what would differentiate the rugby club from, say, the GPAC Foundation?
The essential activity, the bodily injury that would be involved with lacrosse was excluded, and the rugby club, which is excluded. The bodily injury component of that has your risk management needing to seek that they have their own coverage.
Well, but GPAC has performers that are doing things on stages. I mean, so they could be injured. So we're covering. We've named GPAC, so it just seems like we have similar hazards there that we might have in some of the
So
sporting
GPAC is not
events.
an additional insured under this policy, and they have their own coverage.
I understand
covers
that.
answers.
Yeah, I understand it, but you said that the rugby club has their own policy too. So if we're going to name, it seems to me, Mr. McDonald, that we might get into a situation where we've named one organization without naming the other. So then would the insurance company look at that and preclude coverage because we didn't name, well, the rugby club, for example, but the city of Germantown is sued because we let them use our fields, for example. I don't see much difference between, say, GPAC and a rugby club that uses our athletic field. So,
In the underwriter's case, there is a significant difference between young ones that are doing ballet over at Germantown. There's a significant difference between that and grown men tackling each other on a field or lacrosse. Most of the time, you're going to find that a lot of the athletics are excluded and they have to go seek their own coverage.
are we requiring these other 501c3s to seek their own coverage?
Yes.
But then, again, I guess we're back to the point that I don't see much. Can you just talk to the underwriters and explain to them that we have people like the Germantown Football League, for example, that uses our athletic fields? We don't have them listed here.
All of them named the city of Germantown as an additional insured on the policy that they procure. So if there's an event that happens through the additional insured status that you have, they will provide you a defense for being named in that lawsuit for being the landowner for the rugby club or for the cheerleader or for the football league.
But you're telling me that Germantown, the GPAC Foundation 501c3 also provides us with the additional insured status.
They do.
So in that respect, they're no different. And so I don't understand why we would treat them different when naming the organizations on the policy. If you just get back to me with some clarification on that, I don't want to use all the time talking
They
about
are,
it.
sir, they are just a little bit different in the GBL, GFL, and those folks. We have contractual agreements with them that require that they have their insurance, and so that they list us as an additional insured.
Well, we should have contracts with all of these organizations because a lot of the time you don't trigger the additional insured agreement unless you actually have that that contractual language. So we should have these indemnification agreements with every organization that we're affiliated with, and we should be getting certificates of insurance each year. And
Yes, sir, we are.
well, I think we just need to get clarification on why it's okay to list some and not all.
But the ones that are being listed are not provided any additional insured status under City of Germantown's policies, only as respects. It's the exact verbiage that I just read.
Yeah. It just seems like if we're going to do for one, we should do for all, so that we're getting that same language from our carrier, and our underwriter understands that we have all of these different organizations that we're affiliated with, and that we might expect the coverage provision to be triggered under the liability policy from some activity of that organization. So, I mean, you and I understand if GPAC holds an event, someone's injured, and the City of Germantown is sued, that our policy is going to be triggered. The question is, would it still be triggered in the event that the same type of accident occurs that involves another organization with which we happen to be affiliated with?
They've got specific exclusions, particularly on the lacrosse and the rugby teams. And that, my understanding is that that is also statewide. And a little bit of this also goes back to the fact that y'all are covered and protected by governmental tort liability. And so an entity that's not covered by governmental tort liability, they can't come under the same purview that y'all do. And if you take GPAC, for example, y'all do own the building. The employees that are over there are also City of Germantown employees. But as far as this goes, it's not naming them as additional insured on your policy.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. That concludes the Alderman's time on the floor. Further questions? Further discussion?
Yeah, I'll go into round two.
Sure. Alderman Massey?
One thing that we talked about after the executive session was getting a value for our water distribution pipes and our sanitary sewer mains. This wasn't a decision that our broker made, but apparently at some point the city officials made the decision to drop the coverage for those items, and I think we're in agreement. The only time that it would really come into play is if we had an earthquake, a catastrophic event. But I think the board does need to understand the value, the replacement cost of those pipes, and it needs to contemplate whether we want to have those insured at some point in the future. The other thing that we might want to consider is whether or not the $15 million in earthquake coverage that we have today would be sufficient going forward. And I'm not saying that it's not. I just think as part of our due diligence, we need to at least take that into consideration. One thing that I would like to know is that we're covering personal property of others, $250,000 at GPAC. What is the personal property of others that we're covering there?
Okay, the personal property of others at GPAC, did you say?
Yes.
That's what it's showing on the proposal.
Oh, it's the art over there.
Line 160.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's the artwork over there.
So who actually owns that art?
The City of Germantown is covering that for Germantown Performing Arts Center. And then the Germantown Performing Arts Center also carries an insurance policy on the artists that display their artwork in the Germantown Performing Arts Center over there. So there's two. The Germantown Performing Arts Center owns some, but they also are in custody of some artists that are displaying over there.
So why wouldn't GPAC be insuring the art rather than pushing that back onto the City of Germantown?
So as it developed through the years, y'all own the facility over there and the security and everything, and so it was thrown on there. Now that may change in the future depending on how they add on the Grove over there, but at this point the cheapest venue is to have it insured under y'all's policy under personal property of others.
And have you ever considered whether, what the cost would be for the water that we have in the water towers? If there was some catastrophic event that caused us to lose that, do we have any idea of what the business income loss would be to the city for something like that?
Alderman Massey, Mayor, if you will, we can certainly get some of that information for you that you're requesting, but to have that information and try to answer that information right now is a little bit tough on us. So
Oh,
if
that's
you could
okay.
put that in writing to us as to what you'd like, we can certainly provide that to you.
I was just curious if it had been contemplated in the number that's on the policy. I suspect that it probably has, but maybe we just don't have the value at hand. I know we have $1.5 million in business income on here, and so I presume that would have actually been contemplated. I'm just looking to the number, if anybody has it off the top of their head.
No.
I've never, before you brought up the value of the water, I'd never thought about it at all.
Okay.
And you know, we have a lot of breakout sessions with public entity partners as far as sometimes they have claims that come up that aren't covered. They make all the brokers aware, hey, this just came up. That's one reason that cyber liability policy changed a little bit this year, but I've never heard of the value of lost water.
It'd be interesting to know what's a 2 million gallon tank. Is that right?
I don't know.
No.
That's not in my.
500,000 gallon, correct, Andy, and the small one is 75 in terms of the towers.
Got that much water in GAC pool.
Further questions?
Give me just a second, Mayor. On page 5 of 13, it's showing that we have a $2 million gallon reservoir. So maybe this is that
That's the underground reservoir.
Okay, and so if something damages that reservoir, Andy, what kind of loss would the city be looking at from a revenue standpoint?
Director?
Again,
Yeah.
Mayor, that's something that we would have to put together for you. That's just pulling, we'd have to have a lot of information to put that together, and it would be unfair for us to have to answer that.
Thank you, Director. That concludes your time on the floor. Alderman Sanders.
I just had a question, Mayor. For instance, our utility items that are insured here, or for instance, that artwork at GPAC, does any of the premium cost come out of those budgets for those entities?
Director?
Yes. Yes, it's an allocation that's done. Our research and budget do that allocation each year. The allocation budget plus all the workers' comp is hit back to every department. So,
Okay. Thank you, Director.
Whether it's general fund.
whether it's
or
general fund,
enterprise
enterprises, or anything, it's all tied back.
So do you know then, like that piece for the personal property of others at GPAC, does GPAC actually reimburse the city for that portion of that premium?
No,
Director?
there's an expense in GPAC's budget for insurance. There's an expense therefore in the 010 budget, but no, it's not paid back.
And to be clear, the GPAC component, Mayor, is part of the city's general fund.
Right, it's part of our
But
property.
that allocation would go to the general fund, much like the utility allocation would go to that separate enterprise fund.
Thank you for the accounting principles there.
Yes, sir.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
The measure passes. Administration's very glad for the support of the board on that particular item. That brings us to item 13 on the agenda, Ordinance 2019-15, amendments to the Smart Code sections 23-745, 23-763, A and B, and 23-819 of the zoning ordinance. First reading and set public hearing. Director, go ahead, Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. As stated, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to pick up the recommendations from the Planning Commission and consider those as proposed based on the request from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen as part of Resolution 19R08. Resolution 19R08 passed by this board on August 12th, 2019, requested these 4 items that are listed in your agenda sheet. I'll briefly paraphrase, but it was to delete any provision for new standalone single-use apartment developments in the Smart Code District. Any new apartment development in the Smart Growth District should only be considered in vertically integrated mixed-use settings or as a component of an integrated mixed-use development designed and scaled to its surroundings. Establish smart growth design guidelines to minimize the impact on city services and create development projects retaining their value over time, and to define standalone single-use apartment developments. So the Planning Commission considered all 4 of these, and as part of work sessions that they held with the overall moratorium report in August, and asked staff to take a look at these different pieces and parts of the resolution and how we may address these by looking at other cities and ways that other cities have addressed these issues, how they define apartment developments and apartments and where those might be considered. Staff reviewed all of these items, also reviewed other sections of our standard zoning code, and came back at the September 25th work session with the Planning Commission, and again presented proposed text amendments to the board, the Planning Commission, at their meeting on October 23rd, and they considered these that I'll quickly go through at their November 5th meeting and passed, and that's why we're here with you tonight on first reading. So they started by considering the definitions. When looking at the definitions based in our own code, section 23-2, dwelling units for multifamily is defined as 3 or more families living independently within a larger building. Other cities that we looked at also defined this for lease or for rent, 3 or more family unit as multifamily rather than an apartment. So we struck the word apartment where it appeared in the definition section under accessory dwelling unit and replaced it with the term dwelling unit. A dwelling unit is defined as 1 or more rooms as a unit of occupancy by one family for cooking, living, and sleeping, which is a part of a 2-family, a townhouse, or a multifamily structure. That definition is directly from 23-2, the overall definition section for the zoning code. We then struck the term apartment building and carried most of that definition down to the multifamily building, which is a building with 3 or more housing units for sale or rental that share 1 or more common walls. We then broke down multifamily building into 2 different sub-definitions. A multifamily building mixed use, which is a building with 3 or more housing units in a vertically integrated mixed-use setting. The ideal model consists of a building with retail, office, or restaurant uses on the ground floor and residential uses on the upper floor. The second definition is a multifamily building single use, which is a building with 3 or more housing units built as a component of an integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed and scaled to its surroundings. And then finally, we looked at multifamily development standalone single use. And this is defined as a building or group of buildings with 3 or more housing units that share 1 or more common walls and that is built solely for residential purposes and not as a component of an integrated mixed-use development. That last portion was added by the Planning Commission at their meeting on November 5th to further clarify the difference between multifamily development, standalone single use, and the other 2 sub-definitions of a multifamily development, a multifamily building. We also, based on conversations with the Planning Commission at their work session, looked at the duplex house and fixed the definition in the SMART code so that a duplex is defined as a two-family building rather than a multifamily building. We then moved to the use table, which is 23763, and looked at the apartment building as a residential type, and again, struck the word apartment buildings, and we also struck where that use is that residential use type is allowed. So it was previously allowed in the T4, T5, and T6 districts. We then looked at the applicability of multifamily buildings and those two definitions, the mixed use, which is part of a vertically integrated building, and then single use, which is part of a mixed use project. So mixed use, which is the vertically integrated definition, is included as permitted by right in the T5 and T6 districts only. And then the multifamily building single use is permitted by warrant within the T5 and T6 districts only. So we've taken the apartment building out of the T4, 5, and 6 districts and reapplied the multifamily buildings as mixed use permitted by right in T5 and T6, and single use as warrant in T5 and T6. And then finally, in terms of building function as it relates to multifamily development, standalone single use, they shall not be permitted in SMART code districts is how we met that charge by this board as part of the resolution. And then as part of that discussion with the Planning Commission, we talked about the ways that the small area plans guide some of the land use decisions that are made within these SMART code districts. And so as an effort to further reinforce the work that the community, that the boards and commissions, and that this board put into those small area plans, the Planning Commission recommended adding another warrant to the list of warrants, and that's that a deviation from the BMA adopted small area plan land use recommendations is a warrant that's requested. So for example, if a developer wanted to ask for a multifamily building, whether it's mixed use or single use, to go into an area that was designated by the land use plan within the small area plan to only be where office was considered, that would have to be something that they would request by warrant to be considered by both the Planning Commission and this board as a deviation from that land use plan. I'm happy to answer any questions. As we reviewed this, we considered the key performance area of the Germantown Forward 2030 plan of economic development and making sure that these practices support economic sustainability by creating clear and transparent processes within our ordinance to meet these regulations. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Ross, for your presentation. I know there are 3 readings of this particular item. Have any of the board reached out and met with you since the packets were delivered?
I did meet with Alderman Sanders on Friday.
Thank you, Director. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2019-15 on first reading and set the public hearing for January 13th, 2020? Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Discussions are now open. Alderman Owens?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. And for the record, I did have a phone meeting with Mr. Ross today, and we discussed.
Oh, thank you.
This
We stand corrected.
Thank you.
Apologies.
I'd like to say just to thank our staff who worked on the moratorium report. We've said this before, but I think it goes like we need to say it again, that there was a lot of work that went into that, and it was helpful in the Planning Commission's deliberations as well as my deliberations over this issue. As Mr. Ross stated, Director Ross stated, that the Planning Commission studied this issue at length, and they did formulate the recommendation that is before us tonight. I appreciate their work. This language eliminates standalone apartments, and the only planning districts with ready land available left to develop multifamily. In other words, I guess there are some RT districts out there, but those would have to be torn down. The buildings would have to be torn down and redeveloped if they were to develop multifamily. But this eliminates standalone apartments within the smart growth districts. It does achieve the request made in Resolution 19R08, which was approved by this body, the BMA. It defines multifamily buildings. It ensures that any multifamily development will be integrated vertically or, as Mr. Ross provided, under special conditions and only with a warrant as part of an integrated overall plan by a master developer would there be a standalone or single-use apartment or multifamily, could be townhouse, could be condominium. And so from those respects, I think that the Planning Commission has done a good job in that. I appreciate their work. And I also like the fact that we've added that any development proposal would have to comply with a small area plan. You know, it's difficult when you're dealing in high-level zoning to ensure what you are going to get. And I think our small area plans, if the developers are compelled to follow those small area plans, then we feel better that we know what we're going to get. We are going to ensure that what is within that plan is what we're going to get, and I like that. I look forward to reviewing the design guidelines. Mr. Ross, when do you anticipate having those?
Director?
Mayor, we anticipate starting that discussion process at the December Planning Commission Smart Code Committee meeting.
Thank you, Director. You continue. You have the floor.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Further discussion? Alderman Sanders?
Thank you. I have a question about this additional warrant deviation from the small area plans. Those plans were developed, I believe, in 2013. Is there any thought about an update? Some of them seem a little dated when I was reading a couple of them today, for instance.
Director, I believe there were 3 small area plans. Go ahead, though.
Yes, Mayor, there are 3, 2007 for the Central Business District, 2013 for the West Gateway, and 2016 for the Forest Hill Heights area. They are adopted by this board. Any consideration by those would be up to this board as directed.
Right. Those were adopted by resolution, so I assume they could be changed at any time by any board. But
certainly, some may have ordinance changes too. But go ahead.
But my personal problem with those plans, putting this number 16 in there, those plans call for and encourage high-density development, and that is a huge change from what we've been used to in Germantown over the years, and what I hear a lot of residents complain about. So I just mentioned that that's one of the issues I have with that number 16 being in here. I do like the fact that now to have a single-use building, which I assume, and I think that the residents at Thornwood would now require a warrant and have to be voted on. It couldn't, or could that, I guess, since it's part of a mixed-use development, would a building such as the residence at Thornwood, would that be permitted by right, or would it require the warrant?
Director?
Mayor, the residences building at Thornwood would be considered under these definitions a multifamily building single use, so that would be a warrant request.
Thank you. So with the change, now calling it a multifamily building, I guess that includes condominium and row house?
Director?
Mayor, it includes all for sale or rental as defined. However, a row house is defined as a single-family structure. It's got a different set of definitions. If you look on page I apologize. It is not part of the definitions. We didn't carry all the way to the R's in including that, but the row house is defined as a line of single-family structures because they share a facade line, but they are sold with a common wall, but it's different than a duplex.
Thank you, Director. Continue.
So would brownstones that share that common wall in between each, would they be considered a row house, or is that separate in those definitions?
Director.
It would be considered a row house. Row house, townhouse are synonyms.
I think for now, that's all I have. I'll see if I think of anything else, if anyone else has questions that trigger something in my mind.
Thank you, Alderman. The floor is open. Alderman Massey?
Sure. So, Mr. Ross, from my perspective, apartments and multifamily are synonyms. I mean, you've changed the definition of apartments so that it no longer fits in multifamily, but the fact is that we are allowing developers and we're encouraging developers to build apartments in smart growth districts. In the case of Thornwood, what you just told us is that all that would be necessary for a similar structure to go up in any other smart growth district in the future is for a developer to request a warrant. At that point, if the Planning Commission and the board recommends the warrant, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approves that warrant, then a developer would be allowed to build a standalone apartment development in any of the smart growth districts. The other issue that I have is the lack of a definition of component. So we say that any new apartment development in the smart growth.
Mayor, I'm sorry, point of order.
Sure. Yes.
Just for clarification.
What is your point of order?
Just the definition, what he just said is not correct factually. Per our definitions, that is not a standalone apartment. That is, I believe, and
Okay, so your point of order is based on the definition that the Planning Commission brought forward?
that's correct.
Hold the Alderman's time, please. Okay, why don't you give that definition again, please?
So to clarify, we broke these out between buildings and developments. So the residence at Thornwood would be a multifamily building, single use. It shares the same definition as, because you can see through the strikeout that an apartment building was previously defined as a rear yard residential building type accommodating multiple for sale or rental dwellings above and beside each other, sharing a common entry, access directly and facing the street. So we pulled a lot of those words as well as the for sale or rental and applied it to both the mixed use setting, which is vertically integrated as a building, and then the single use setting, which is integrated to a mixed use project. And then according to the resolution, the request was to define standalone and single use apartment developments. So the definition was created for a multifamily development, standalone single use, which is defined as a building or group of buildings with 3 or more housing units that share 1 or more common walls, built solely for residential purposes and not as a component of an integrated mixed-use development. So that separates it between the multifamily building single use and the multifamily development standalone single use.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. And I know this board asked staff and the Planning Commission to help with those definitions. That was one of the measures of the resolution. Alderman, you have the floor. Please continue the Alderman's time.
So, Mr. Ross, a lot of us who grew up in the South, had grandfathers that had a saying. It wasn't exactly like this, but it was similar. He'd say, don't spit in my eye and tell me that it's raining. And that's kind of what we're doing with these definitions to the residents. It's pretty devious or pretty devious and deceptive, in my opinion. To say that Thornwood isn't apartments is just being dishonest. I mean, they are apartments. Anybody that has driven by them and sees them knows them as apartments. They've been called luxury apartments. So to say that they're anything other than apartments, I just think is very misleading, and I think it's wrong. I think part of the problem with the entire smart growth from beginning to today is that city officials just haven't been honest. You've tried to work things to fit what the developers wanted, and city officials have acted for political reasons. And I think today we just need to stop all of it and say, you know what, we don't want any more apartments. And it's very plain, it's very simple. The residents of Germantown have made that very clear to us, and that's what needs to occur. Now, stop my time if you don't mind. Point of order. Point of order.
Your point of order on your own time.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
No, the city administrator is holding side conversations and it's
Fine.
distracting. No, it's a breach of our rules, and he needs to stop. He needs to show respect for the other members of the board. We're not supposed to talk.
Continuous time. Staff can have sidebars to prepare. Go ahead. We've
Well,
done
it's
that for years.
disrespectful.
The Alderman has the floor.
So what should have really happened, in my opinion, is that we should have rewritten the smart code to eliminate all apartments, or multifamily, standalone multifamily, whatever you want to call it. You and I can both say that they're apartments. I mean, let's get around the semantics of calling it one thing. Right? It's apartments. It's more than one dwelling unit side by side that's rented to people. And that's pretty plain. So we could have done that. We could have eliminated the apartments from the smart code, and then at some point in the future, if a developer could make the case for having apartments in one of these smart growth districts, they should have been required to come back and justify the zoning amendments that would have permitted those apartments to be built. But the city of Germantown, for some reason, wants to do that backwards. You want to make it so that developers can build apartments, and then the citizens have to argue why it's wrong. I think the developers should be in a position of explaining to the people's representatives why the apartments should be permitted in these smart growth districts near their neighborhoods. So perhaps you can explain why the city made the decision in the beginning to make it so easy for developers to build these apartments, or if you want to call them multifamily.
Point of order, Mayor.
What is your point of order?
Just stick to the topic of what we were discussing. It is not germane.
I think it's somewhat broad in a sense. This is a pretty large topic, and I would say to the alderman that currently has the floor, you know, be a little bit more specific. You can't ask staff or anyone else on this board to try to encapsulate 15 or 16 years of planning and give one clear answer. So continue. You've got 20 seconds left with this time on the floor. Go ahead, Alderman.
So the last 20 seconds, Mr. Ross, I'd simply ask you to explain the justification for these changes.
I can help you out with that. This board asked...
I didn't ask you, Mayor. I asked Mr. Ross.
You know what? You're supposed to go through the chair, and I am the administration. I can answer on behalf of staff if needed.
You didn't even vote on this. You abstained. So how can you tell me you can answer anything? You weren't even man enough to vote on your own resolution.
His time is concluded, please. The staff, the question at hand, we brought forth administration based on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen's approval of a resolution to ask the Planning Commission and staff to bring this forward. So that's where we are today. The floor is open for discussion. Anyone? Alderman Sanders?
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor, that we strike number 16 in its entirety under the warrant section.
There is an amendment that has been brought forward to strike item 16 from this ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just think that I encourage my fellow aldermen to look at some of those small area plans. I know some are older, some may be newer, but they do encourage that we develop in a high-density fashion in these smaller small area plans. And many of them do say we include apartments in that plan. The Western Gateway plan, for instance, that I looked at today, listed some potential numbers in option B and option C, and most of that number for that entire small area plan is going to be met if the CARIFOR comes through with the plan that they've submitted and it gets approved. So that doesn't even count if Westminster or the other property in that gateway gets redeveloped. So that's one of the reasons that I encourage a vote to strike number 16 from the warrant section.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Alderman Yonda.
Mayor, maybe I don't understand this number 16. It's saying, what I understand it to be saying, is that in addition to the criteria noted above, the following specific instances may be considered for warrants. So we list warrants, but we can't list everything. I mean, you could come up with thousands maybe. So we're saying that any deviation from the BMA adopted small area plan land use recommendations could be considered for warrants. Is that right?
That would be my interpretation of that. Yes, I guess if you were to vote affirmatively with here, you'd be taking away authority from the BMA. But continue, you have the floor.
So we're giving ourselves the authority to make the decision.
That is correct.
I'm not quite understanding why our Alderman wants to remove it then.
Any other comments?
That's it.
Alderman Yonda? Any other discussion on this particular item?
Yeah, as long as this is pertaining to the motion.
Sure.
Alderman Sanders, perhaps you can go into more elaboration, but I got to be honest with you. On this, I'm not sure that I completely understand what you're trying to accomplish either. It seems like this was a means of providing some protection from the board, but I may be missing that. I may have misinterpreted it myself, so maybe Mr. Ross could provide some insight into what the intent was here.
Intent is fine. Be short with that, though.
Mayor, the intent was to do exactly what Alderman Massey previously described, was to hold fast to the areas of the plan that are important and to make developers come up and justify their changes, whether they are perceived as good, bad, or other, is for the Planning Commission and for this board to consider as part of the warrant process.
Thank you, Director.
So
further discussion?
If 16 isn't there, what are the consequences from our perspective as a board with a developer being able to get things approved that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get approved, were 16 not there?
Director?
Mayor, I would say it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Where 16 not there, then it makes staff's job more challenging when dealing with developers to say, it says your zoning is T5 right there. I want this parcel and I want to put an apartment building or a multifamily building, single use, in this particular portion. Whereas the land use plan, through a thoughtful exercise with citizens, boards, commissions, et cetera, came up with an engaging land use plan that said that that needed to be an area for activity beyond just multifamily, that it needed to be a vertically integrated mixed-use building, that it had activity around there, or that that was a cluster for offices based on surrounding context of uses as proposed. So by having this, it gives staff a tool to say to a developer or to a property owner, if you want to go down this road, it's going to be bumpy and challenging because you have to justify your position to deviate from this community plan that was adopted by these boards and commissions and justify that, similar to every other warrant process.
Director, thank you. Very well stated. Yeah, you have the floor, sir.
I guess an example would be the case of Viridian, where we had a situation where we had one plan and the developer came back and asked for plans, basically just standalone apartments without the multi-use. concept. At that point, you would be able to say, while you may be permitted to do this, it deviates enough from what the small area plan said from a density standpoint and a use standpoint that we are going to require you to request a warrant.
Director?
That could be one example, yes.
Alderman Sanders, I'll look to you for clarification. You met with Mr. Ross, and so you may have today, I think, and so you may have more insight. So I really am looking for a reason to vote one way or the other. So please, if you don't mind providing me some clarification in the remaining minute that I have.
Yeah, this is not Q&A with your board members. You have the floor. He can respond if he wants the floor later.
He asked for this change, and I'm asking him for clarification. I should be able to get that clarification from my colleague.
If he decides to, that would be fine.
We should be able to use my time to finish answering it. It's my time, Mayor.
Well,
It's my time. I want clarification.
Use it however you like. I'm not recognizing Alderman Sanders. Would you like to use any more of your 40 seconds? Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
I guess for clarification for the board, my thought is with the plans that were created, small area plans, they encourage high density, multi-use, urban development in our city. And it's my thought that requiring number 16 being in here requires a developer to look at that. If, for instance, maybe I'll ask administration, if the Carrefour, for instance, wanted to just redevelop as a mall like it is today, and this was in here, would that require a warrant because it's not high density and not mixed use?
They can develop under the existing land use ordinance or the small area plan. They cannot do a combination of both. They can choose one of the two. Would that be an accurate assessment, Director?
Yes, Mayor,
You can add on to it. Go ahead.
The ability to redevelop under their current use is afforded to them by 23-743 that says all pre-existing structures can apply to utilize the previously provided zoning districts.
Thank you, Director.
Correct. Underlying zoning could be used, but if this is in there, does the small area plan say that existing underlying zoning can be used, or does it say this area we want developed in a particular way?
Well, that will depend on the developer's application. Would that be accurate, Director?
Yes, Mayor, but again, 743 provides them the ability to utilize their underlying zoning as well as the T districts.
Okay, then with the board's permission then, I don't believe I have support, and with this further clarification, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Alderman. Let me get a clarification real quick. Without objection, Board? All right, and I see no objection. That will be removed as an amendment. We return to the original motion. It's been properly moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Sure.
Alderman Massey?
First, I think I'd like to make a motion that we postpone this vote tonight. You know, number 3 says that we have to establish smart growth design guidelines to minimize the impact on city services and create development projects that retain their value over time. These guidelines need to be established before we make this decision.
Alderman Massey, you have made a motion to postpone. I think that speaks loudly and clearly on its own. Is there a second? Seeing no second?
Is there a time limit on this postponement, Mayor?
The motion was made to postpone. No, there was no further clarification on that.
Well, until we get the guidelines and established, I mean, that is part of it.
One moment, please. Would you care to clarify your motion and say postpone until the next meeting? That's what our parliamentarian has advised on postponing. It can be either to the conclusion or at some other point in this meeting, or no later than the next meeting.
Parliamentary inquiry. What would the procedure be to postpone it, to give staff more time to establish the guidelines that are referenced in number 3?
Well, the parliamentarian doesn't answer staff questions. The staff would get to work and create some urgency to answer this board's request.
I think they're going to need additional time, and so what would be the process for extended till for 2 meetings? Let's say if it's not postponed, then
only until the next regularly scheduled meeting. Would you like to include that in your motion?
sure, I'll postpone until the next regularly scheduled Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting.
That'll be January 13th. Correct? No, I'm sorry.
December 9th.
That'd be January the.
December 9th.
I'm sorry, excuse me, yeah. So just to clarify, postpone until December 9th. That was made in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Does it call for any discussion, Mayor?
I think it's pretty evident. Go ahead. Yeah, only on the wisdom of postponing, nothing on the main motion.
Well, I'd just simply state that I believe the Alderman has a good point that we did have 4 areas that the initial resolution asked for. This document doesn't cover number 3, so it seems like we'd be taking it in a piecemeal fashion, so I think it'd be good to just combine all this together and handle it at one time.
Any further discussion? Alderman Owens.
Cameron, you and I had a discussion about this very thing. Could you elaborate on where we are and the deadline for the moratorium, or just, I guess, expound upon that?
Director.
Happy to. The Planning Commission, as directed by the resolution, was asked to consider amendments as we've gone over those. 1, 2, and 4 are ordinance-driven, so they require 3 readings, which is a task that is more time-sensitive than what 3 is. To establish smart growth design guidelines to minimize the impact on city services and create development projects that retain their value over time is a resolution type of consideration by this board, so that would be a 1 hearing process, and the Planning Commission stated that they would like to understand and know that the BMA was comfortable with their recommendations and the changes to the Smart Code ordinance before they proceeded any further on this. So that's why the Planning Commission will be taking up discussion on these design guidelines at their December subcommittee meeting, waiting to understand how this board considers this after the first reading process. We have until February 12th for the expiration of this current moratorium to get these tasks done, so that is why we are here at first reading on the 25th, to allow for plenty of time before the public hearing in January and to allow for some flexibility between second and third reading, because the meeting in February still falls ahead of February 12th.
Thank you, Director.
And so, in all likelihood, you plan on having the design guidelines before us prior to third reading?
Director.
Yes, prior to the close of the moratorium in February.
Okay.
You have the floor.
I think that's it. I appreciate the other aldermen's responses there, and that was my understanding, that we were going to be looking at the design guidelines prior to third and final reading, so we would have those
That is our
available.
intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman Massey?
Yep. Again, I just think we're putting the cart before the horse by voting on the zoning ordinance tonight that had as part of that, as part of the ordinance itself or part of the directives, to establish smart growth design guidelines to minimize the impact on city services and create development projects that retain their value over time. That was a specific instruction from this board, and it hasn't been carried out. And I think that we wouldn't be wise to vote on this ordinance tonight without these guidelines being in place. I think that needs to be done first, and frankly, I think that gives the administration some incentive to get that done sooner rather than later. Otherwise, they can continue to postpone providing us with the guidelines. I mean, we have to have some way of getting the administration to take action, and I think postponing it will be a good way to accomplish that. The Planning Commission can create the guidelines. They can bring those back to us. If we feel like changes need to be incorporated into the guidelines, we can do that, and then we can vote on the ordinance as part of the first reading. But I think that the guidelines need to be established first.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Please, Alderman Owens, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens. No. Alderman Yonda.
This is, do you have a point of order or a point of inquiry?
Mayor?
Yes.
I
Yeah,
have
hold on,
incorrectly
hold on.
stated my vote.
Oh, just one moment, please. So, did you have any?
I thought we were back on the main motion.
Oh, hold on one second, please. Did you have a point of order or point of inquiry? Alderman Yonda, go ahead. Inquiry. On what? Okay, so the motion in front of you is to postpone this particular agenda item until December what was that date again? December the 9th. So does that answer your question on the inquiry? Vice Mayor, do you have a point of order or point of inquiry?
I do. The point of inquiry is I have misstated my vote. I thought we were back on the main motion. I didn't realize that. Thank you.
Let's start from the top. Let's see, Clerk Betty, if you could call the roll from the beginning for wherever you started from.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
This is to postpone.
No.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
No.
Alderman Yonda,
No.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
The motion fails. We move back to the original motion that's on the table to approve ordinance 2019-15 on first reading and set public hearing for January 13th, 2020. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Massey, you've exhausted your 2 times on the floor.
No, I haven't. I made a motion, and my
Alderman
time
Massey,
wasn't
you have
finished.
exhausted your 2 times on the floor.
I'd like to ask that the parliamentarian.
Your point is well made. You have the floor.
Thank you. Mayor, during the Planning Commission meeting, I noticed that you abstained from this vote. Can you explain your reason for abstaining from the vote since you were the person that was the applicant?
Sure. If you weren't in attendance, but it's been memorialized in tape, and also obviously it's not verbatim in the records. I brought forth the application, so I felt like it was not appropriate to weigh in on the decision. I abstained. I also made the statement to the Planning Commission that if the Planning Commission had difficulty with their vote and there was a tie, I was prepared to participate in making a vote that evening, so I did not participate in discussion or dialogue and abstain from a vote.
Well, I would like to make the point that if you're going to abstain from participating in a discussion at the Planning Commission level, you might also do the same thing when we're having a discussion as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. If it was appropriate at the Planning Commission level, it should be appropriate
Alderman,
here.
your point's not well taken. I'm a member of this board, and I have voting rights as well. So
Well, you have
continue.
voting rights on the Planning Commission. You
have-
abstained from that vote.
That's correct. I can abstain, recuse, vote affirmative, or vote negative. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Ross, with the changes that have been made, you know, what properties today, without the changes, could apartments be built upon?
Director?
The properties that are within the T4, T5, and T6 districts of the zoning map.
Okay. In number 1, it says delete any provision for new standalone single-use apartment developments in the smart codes. Where were those words deleted?
Director?
There was no definition providing for standalone single-use apartment buildings within the smart code, so we went to the building function section, which had a series of functions that say not conforming to the requirements of 23-763A shall require approval by warrant, and accessory uses of limited lodging or limited office shall be permitted within an outbuilding in the T4 districts only. That language seemed to be outmoded and not coming standard language from the smart code that was adopted back in 2008, and so we proposed to the Planning Commission of adding in this language to create a definitive statement in terms of building function that multifamily development, standalone single use, shall not be permitted in the smart code districts. That is a definitive statement within the building function section of the permitted uses of the use table that standalone single-use developments shall not be allowed.
But under the smart growth or smart code, there was never really any provision that specifically permitted new standalone single-use apartment developments. They were.
Director?
It was vague at best, so this was an ability to, again, provide a definitive statement to it so that interpretations could not be made.
Thank you, Director.
Speaking of interpretations, one of the things that that the Planning Commission was asked to do was consider amendments that would, and it doesn't say, it just says any new apartment development in the smart growth district should only be considered in vertically integrated mixed-use settings or as a component of an integrated mixed-use development. So, speaking of vagueness, there's no definition of a component. So who gets to decide the extent of a development of multi-use that is apartments that would be considered a component of a mixed-use development? So how are we going to define component? Should that be done now? Who are the individuals that will decide whether there is a sufficient component to be allowed to have apartments?
Director?
While it would be considered on an application-by-application basis, Mayor, we simply use the words that were used in Resolution 19R08 that stated also as a component of an integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed and scaled to its surroundings. The Planning Commission assumed that if the words were appropriate for the resolution, that they could be appropriate for the definitions to bring back to this board.
Thank you, Director. That concludes your time on the floor. Further discussion? Alderman Owens.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I think again, I'll state and try and be brief, the hour is late. What the Planning Commission has done is what we have directed, in my opinion, and that is to remove single-use standalone apartments in the smart growth district. And I think that's a good thing. I think when the smart code and the small area plans were envisioned, we took public input, we took consultants and utilized their expertise, and we garnered information and we developed these plans, and there was a long planning process that went into that. And so I think we're talking about just a few areas of the city that can benefit from mixed-use development. And I think it's important. I think the vision is a good one. We are not talking about a proliferation of multifamily throughout the community. We're talking about a very small area that's going to contribute to areas that are active, that are vibrant, that contribute long-term to the well-being of the city, economically, that are architecturally sound, that have landscaping, that are walkable. I mean, you've heard me, I'm sorry, give this spiel a million times, and so forgive me, but I do think for our city, long-term, in small doses, in little areas, that these type of uses or type of developments can greatly contribute to the long-term viability of our city, and I believe that. I think, you know, if you look at Thornwood, you know, I understand, Alderman Sanders, you've talked about that being a standalone apartment. Alderman Massey, you've talked the same, and I don't disagree with you that there is a standalone component apartment of that, but it is a part of a larger mixed-use development. And while some of our residents may not like that, I think that once it is done, once it is complete, once the single-family residential is built out, once the hotels are built out, once the landscaping is fully grown, that it is going to be a place that we're very proud of and that people will want to spend time in. You know, look at the restaurants and the dining and choices and the retail that we've got over there right now, the open space. It's nice, but and so I think we can see more of that. We can even build on what we've done there in areas such as the Care For and the Central Business District, and that would be my hope for the city. And I think those are the type of developments, when you have mixed uses, that will stand the test of time, that won't be a retail standalone district that just, you know, over time may crumble or have to get redeveloped. There won't be a standalone multifamily district that does the same. I think these type of mixed-use developments have proven over time to contribute to the well-being of the city and be long-lasting, and that is my hope for what we will see in the future development of these areas. So with that, I guess I'll be quiet and let us go home.
Thank you, Alderman Owens. Any further discussion? Alderman Sanders, I have you for 2 times on the floor.
Is that on the amendment or on the original motion?
I stand corrected. Go ahead.
I do like the fact that in the use table, we have multifamily building, mixed use, listed. Well, I'm not sure. I don't like it being permitted by right, but there is a multifamily building, single use, listed, but it's by warrant. Is that correct?
Director?
So
Yes,
there could
that's
be,
correct.
So there could be a single apartment building, but as long as it's on a property similar to Thornwood or that has mixed use, overall one developer, and if the warrant was approved, we're going to have more apartment buildings like the residents at Thornwood, or that is possible. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Director.
That's an assumption, but yes.
With the ability to have checks and balances in place, because there are warrants. Continue, please.
So I do like that fact in this ordinance that we do have to consider it as a warrant, and there is a chance that we could convince a simple majority to not approve it, I guess. And with that, I'll just conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
From my perspective, I'm going to give my reasoning here.
You can only do that in debate. It's either yes, no, abstain.
Mayor, we've always provided a justification during the vote, so
It's only in the,
parliamentarians
that's only in the case,
changing our rules.
No, he is not. That's only in the case of a zoning change. Go ahead.
Point of inquiry, I'm going to
Point of
ask
inquiry.
the city attorney if that's correct, because we have always been able to state our reasons during the actual vote. So why is the
City attorney.
parliamentarian changing our rules?
City Attorney?
I'm not aware of anything that would prevent the chair from establishing that as a rule. I don't know what y'all have done in the past.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead and continue with your vote, please.
We're talking about zoning changes we have.
I mean, we're
Also in the debate as well.
this is generally where we do it.
continue with your vote, please.
Am I having the opportunity to explain?
Either yes, no, or abstain.
No.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
No.
The motion carries and moves to a second reading and public hearing on January 13th of 2020. We've reached the conclusion of our meeting tonight. I would just a couple of quick items. I know commission applications are due by Friday, the 29th of this month, so please, residents, if you'd like to serve, get those applications in online. We'd like to congratulate Houston High School for going to the semifinals. They'll be playing Ravenwood Friday night in, I guess, Murfreesboro area. And the board and staff would like to wish everyone a very, very happy Thanksgiving with your family. We're adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.